Gabriel, I'm sorry. I can't. The words hung in the air like poison. 200 guests held their breath as Lara Saunders, radiant in Italian lace, her bouquet trembling in her hands, looked down at the man she was supposed to marry. Gabriel Brady sat at the altar in his custom tuxedo, his wheelchair gleaming under the chapel lights. His hands gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles went white. "You're a good man," Laura whispered, loud enough for the front row to hear. "But I need someone who can stand beside me, not someone I have to push." The minister's Bible slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a crack that echoed like a judge's gavel. Gabriel didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just nodded once, slowly, and rolled himself back down the aisle while 200 people watched in horrified silence. The woman he loved had just told the world he wasn't enough. But 5 years later, Laura Saunders would walk into a boardroom and discover something that would shatter her perfectly constructed world. The man she threw away because he couldn't walk had become the man who could destroy her career with a single signature. How did a broken man in a wheelchair become a venture capital titan, powerful enough to buy out the company of the woman who abandoned him? And more importantly, what will he do now that he holds all the power? Stay with us because this isn't just a revenge story. This is about the day Laura Saunders learned that strength was never about legs. It was about the spine to rise when the world expects you to stay down. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if you want to see how this plays out, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will redefine everything you thought you knew about power, pride, and second chances. Now let's go back to the beginning. Back to the day Gabriel Brady's life fell apart, and the moment he decided to build an empire from the wreckage. 3 years before the altar. Gabriel Brady was the kind of man who filled a room, 6'2", broad shoulders, the type who'd carry all the groceries in one trip just to make Lara laugh. He was a rising venture capitalist at Meridian Capital, the guy with the golden instinct for startups that would explode into unicorns. Lara was a junior analyst at Saunders and Associates, hungry and brilliant, working 16-hour days to prove she belonged in a world that didn't make space for women who looked like her. They met at a charity gala. He spilled champagne on her dress. She made him buy her dinner as penance. 6 months later, he proposed on the rooftop of a hotel he'd helped finance, the city lights sprawling beneath them like a promise. "I'm going to build you a life," he'd said, slipping the ring onto her finger. And for a while, he did. Then came the accident, a weekend hiking trip, a trail that crumbled beneath his feet. Gabriel fell 40 feet down a ravine, his body slamming into rock and roots. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. Lucky. As if waking up and discovering your spine had been severed at T10 was some kind of gift. As if being told you'd never walk again was a blessing in disguise. Lara stayed. At first, she was there in the hospital, holding his hand through the surgeries, the infections, the physical therapy sessions where grown men sobbed into towels. She smiled when he finally sat up on his own. She cheered when he transferred from bed to chair without help. She said all the right things. "We'll get through this together, Gabriel. I love you, not your legs." But love, Gabriel would learn, was easier to promise than to live. The first crack came 6 months after the accident. Lara got promoted to senior analyst, a huge leap, the kind that required late nights and client dinners and travel. Gabriel was still navigating a world that hadn't been built for him, still fighting with insurance companies and accessibility contractors and his own traitorous body. "I can't make it to the dinner tonight," he'd say, exhausted after a day of appointments. "That's fine," she'd reply, but her eyes would flicker with something that looked like relief. The second crack came when her colleagues started asking questions. Is he getting better? Will he walk again? As if his worth had an expiration date tied to his ability to stand. Lara never corrected them. By the time Gabriel returned to work, taking virtual meetings, analyzing pitch decks from his home office, slowly rebuilding his network one Zoom call at a time, Lara was already gone in every way that mattered. She'd look at him across the dinner table and he could see it. The mental math she was doing, the life she'd imagined versus the life she had, the man who used to carry her versus the man who needed ramps installed. She never said it out loud. not until the altar. But Gabriel had known for months that he was losing her. What he didn't know was that losing her would be the thing that finally set him free. Gabriel didn't make a scene. That was the thing that haunted Lara in the weeks after the wedding that never was. He just left. No angry calls, no desperate texts begging for another chance, no showing up at her apartment demanding answers. He simply rolled out of that chapel and vanished like smoke. Within 2 weeks, his penthouse was on the market. Within a month, it sold, furniture and all, to a tech CEO who paid cash. His car, his art collection, even the engagement ring he'd custom designed, all liquidated through private sales and auction houses. Friends who tried to reach him got voicemails that were never returned. His LinkedIn went dark. His social media disappeared. Gabriel Brady, the man everyone knew, ceased to exist. Lara told herself she didn't care, told herself she'd made the right choice, the smart choice. She had a career to build, a legacy to cement. She didn't have time to babysit a man who'd become a liability to her image, her trajectory, her future. And build she did. 6 months after the wedding, Lara closed the Hartman deal, a merger worth $40 million that had her name on every trade publication in the city. A year later, she made junior partner. 2 years after that, she had a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and an assistant who scheduled her life in 15-minute increments. But success came with a price, and Lara paid it in pieces of herself she didn't realize she was losing. She became ruthless, the kind of executive who fired underperformers over email, who crushed competitors without a second thought, who smiled at clients with her mouth but never her eyes. The junior analysts called her the Iron Lady behind her back, not with admiration, but with fear. She dated briefly, a lawyer, then a surgeon, then a hedge fund manager who looked perfect on paper and felt like cardboard in person. None of them lasted. None of them made her feel the way Gabriel once had, back when he'd look at her like she was the only person in the room. She told herself she didn't miss him, told herself the occasional dreams, Gabriel at the altar, his face blank as she walked away, were just stress, just her subconscious processing old trauma. But sometimes, late at night in her empty penthouse, she'd wonder where he'd gone, if he was okay, if he'd found someone else, someone better, someone who didn't see his wheelchair before she saw him. She never looked for him, though. Never hired a private investigator or asked mutual friends, because deep down, Lara knew that if she found him, she'd have to face what she'd done. And the Iron Lady didn't do regret. She didn't know that Gabriel hadn't just disappeared. He'd been building something in the shadows, something that would bring him back into her life in the most devastating way possible. 5 years after the wedding that never happened, Lara Saunders stood in a conference room that smelled like expensive coffee and quiet panic. Across the table, 3 board members stared at her with the kind of expressions people wore at funerals. "How bad is it?" she asked, though she already knew. "You didn't call an emergency meeting at 7 in the morning, unless the building was on fire." "Catastrophic," said Richard, the CFO, sliding a folder across the mahogany. "Marcus embezzled $18 million over 3 years. Fake accounts, shell companies, the whole operation. The SEC is circling. Our clients are fleeing. We have maybe 6 weeks before we're insolvent." Marcus Gareth, senior partner, Lara's mentor, the man who taught her how to close deals and crush negotiations. He'd been arrested 2 days ago at his vacation home in the Hamptons, and the fallout was a mushroom cloud that threatened to vaporize everything Saunders and Associates had built over 4 decades. Lara's hands didn't shake as she opened the folder, but it was a near thing. 18 million, gone, and with it, the firm's reputation, its credit lines, its future. "We need an investor," she said, her voice steady even as her mind raced. "Someone with deep pockets and a tolerance for risk. We restructure, we rebrand, We've tried," interrupted Aaliyah Ryan, the head of operations. "Every firm we've approached has said no. We're toxic right now, Lara. No one wants to touch us." The Iron Lady didn't panic. She'd built her career on staying calm when everyone else lost their heads. But as she looked at the numbers, the hemorrhaging accounts, the lawsuits piling up, the clients jumping ship, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear. She'd sacrificed everything for this firm. Her personal life, her relationships, the man she loved. She'd become someone she barely recognized, all in service of climbing a ladder that was now collapsing beneath her feet. There has to be someone, Lara said, and she hated how desperate she sounded. What about international investors? Private equity? Venture capital? Richard exchanged a glance with Patricia. There is one offer on the table. Lara's pulse quickened. From who? A firm called Brady International. They're relatively new but extremely well capitalized. They've been buying up distressed assets across the city. Real estate, tech startups, failing corporations. They're offering to acquire a controlling stake and inject the capital we need to survive. What's the catch? They want full operational control, new leadership structure. The existing partners would report to their CEO. Richard paused. It's a takeover, Lara, not a partnership. Lara's jaw tightened. Report to someone else? After everything she'd built. But what choice did she have? It was surrender or watch the firm burn. Set up a meeting, she said. I want to meet this CEO face to face. She had no idea she already had. The name Brady International appeared on Lara's radar like a ghost she couldn't quite place. It whispered at the edges of her consciousness, familiar but just out of reach, like a song she'd heard in another lifetime. She started digging the moment Richard mentioned them, pulled up their corporate filings, their acquisition history, their registered agents. What she found was a company that had materialized seemingly out of nowhere 3 years ago and had been quietly devouring the market ever since. Brady International had purchased a struggling pharmaceutical startup that was now worth $500 million. They'd bought a chain of boutique hotels and turned them into the hottest properties in the city. They'd invested in green energy, AI development, medical technology, a portfolio so diverse and successful, it seemed almost impossible. But the CEO's identity was a black hole. No photos, no interviews, no public appearances. Every filing listed the same registered agent, a law firm that specialized in privacy for high net worth clients. The board of directors was a rotating cast of executives who all declined to comment when Lara's assistant tried to reach them. It's like they don't exist, Lara muttered, scrolling through page after page of corporate documents that told her everything and nothing. She tried LinkedIn. Nothing. She tried industry contacts. No one had met the CEO in person. All negotiations happened through intermediaries. All contracts signed by proxies with power of attorney. She even hired a private investigator, a woman who'd once tracked down a hedge fund manager hiding assets in the Cayman Islands. The investigator came back empty-handed. Whoever runs Brady International is a ghost, she said, or they're very, very good at staying invisible. The more Lara searched, the more obsessed she became. She'd wake up at 3 in the morning and find herself at her laptop, cross-referencing shell companies and subsidiary holdings, looking for a pattern, a name, anything that would tell her who was about to own her future. Brady. The name rattled around in her head like a marble in an empty room. Why did it feel so familiar? She pulled up old contacts, people she'd worked with years ago, before she became the Iron Lady, before the wedding that never was. One of them mentioned that Gabriel Brady had been in venture capital before he disappeared. But that was impossible. Gabriel was gone. Gabriel was broken. Gabriel couldn't possibly have built an empire from a wheelchair while she'd been clawing her way to the top. Could he? No. She dismissed the thought as quickly as it came. Gabriel had vanished into obscurity. This was someone else, had to be. But the night before the meeting, Lara stood at her penthouse window, staring at the city lights, and felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Tomorrow she'd meet the CEO of Brady International. Tomorrow she'd learn exactly who held her fate in their hands. Lara arrived at the office an hour early. She'd chosen her armor carefully, a charcoal Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, heels that added 3 inches to her height, hair pulled back in a sleek bun that said she meant business, the Iron Lady at her finest. The boardroom had been prepared like a stage, fresh flowers, sparkling water in crystal glasses. The presentation she'd worked on until 2 in the morning queued up on the screen. A pitch for why she should remain as senior partner, why her vision was the one that would save the firm. Richard and Patricia were already there, both looking like they hadn't slept. The other board members trickled in, their faces masks of professional anxiety. Everyone knew what was at stake. This meeting would determine whether Saunders and Associates survived or became another cautionary tale in the business journals. "Any word on when they're arriving?" Lara asked, glancing at her watch. 9:58. "Their assistant said 10 o'clock sharp," Richard replied. Lara positioned herself at the head of the table, standing. She wanted the height advantage, wanted to be the first thing the CEO saw when they walked through those doors. She'd spent 5 years becoming someone who commanded rooms, and she wasn't about to let some mysterious investor take that from her. 10 o'clock came. The doors opened. Lara's smile was already in place, her hand extended for a power shake, her opening line ready on her tongue. But the words died before they could form. Because the man who rolled through those doors, in a wheelchair that probably cost more than her car, wearing a Tom Ford suit that fit like it had been sewn onto his body, with a Patek Philippe watch catching the light on his wrist, was Gabriel Brady. The room tilted. Or maybe that was just Lara's world collapsing. He looked different. Older, yes, but that wasn't it. His jaw was sharper, like he'd carved away everything soft. His eyes were harder, colder, the warm brown she remembered replaced by something that looked like polished stone. His shoulders were broader. He'd clearly spent the last 5 years in the gym, building the body he could control. But it was him. Unmistakably, devastatingly him. Gabriel rolled to the head of the table, her spot, and stopped. He didn't look at her. Not yet. He set a leather portfolio on the table with the kind of casual confidence that came from owning everything in the room, including the people. Then finally he raised his eyes to hers. "Miss Saunders," he said, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. "Thank you for meeting with me. I'm Gabriel Brady, CEO of Brady International." He paused, and something that might have been a smile ghosted across his lips. "I believe we've met before." The bouquet of flowers on the table suddenly smelled like a funeral. Lara expected to be fired, expected Gabriel to savor the moment, to tell her in front of the entire board that her services were no longer required, to watch her pack her office while security hovered nearby. It would have been poetic, justified even. But Gabriel didn't fire her. That would have been mercy. Instead, he restructured the entire firm with surgical precision, and when the dust settled, Lara found herself exactly where she'd started a decade ago, at the bottom. "You'll be heading up client recovery," Gabriel said during their first operational meeting, his tone as neutral as if he were discussing the weather. "We've lost 43 accounts in the last 6 weeks. Your job is to get them back." Client recovery, it was the corporate equivalent of being sent to grovel, calling people who'd already said no, convincing them to trust a firm that had just been gutted by scandal, eating humble pie 3 meals a day. "That's junior associate work," Lara said, her voice tight. Gabriel finally looked at her, and his expression was unreadable. "Then I suppose you'll be very good at it, unless you'd prefer to resign." She wanted to. God, she wanted to walk out with her head high and never look back. But she had a mortgage, student loans that still haunted her. And more than that, she had pride. She wasn't going to let him win by making her quit. "I'll get it done," she said through clenched teeth. And so began the most humiliating 3 months of Lara's professional life. She made cold calls to clients who hung up on her. She sat through meetings where people who used to respect her now looked at her with pity or contempt. She drafted proposals that got rejected, revised them, got rejected again. Every small victory felt like climbing a mountain with broken legs. Gabriel watched it all from a distance, never cruel, never gloating, but always there. He'd appear in meetings she was leading, sitting quietly in the back, his presence a constant reminder of the power dynamic. He'd review her work with the same detached professionalism he showed everyone else, offering feedback that was fair but never warm. The worst part was that he was brilliant. She'd watch him negotiate deals with a strategic mind that made her old mentor look like an amateur. He'd restructure departments with an efficiency that saved jobs and maximized profit. He'd turn down acquisitions that looked good on paper, but had hidden flaws she'd never have caught. The man she'd left at the altar because she thought he was broken had become the most formidable businessman she'd ever seen. And every day she stayed, every project she completed, every client she won back, felt like an admission that she'd been catastrophically wrong about what strength actually looked like. Gabriel never said it out loud. He didn't have to. It happened on a Thursday night, 3 months into Laura's professional purgatory. She'd been at the office since 6 that morning, chasing down the Kellerman account, a tech mogul who'd pulled $15 million in assets after the scandal. She'd finally gotten him on the phone, finally convinced him to meet, only to have Gabriel override her proposal and offer terms that were somehow better than what she'd spent weeks crafting. She found him in his office at 11 p.m., the city lights sprawling behind him like a kingdom he'd conquered. Why? The word came out sharper than she intended. She was exhausted, running on coffee and spite, and the last thread of her composure had finally snapped. Gabriel looked up from his laptop, his expression neutral. You'll need to be more specific. Why are you doing this? Laura stepped into the office, her heels clicking against the hardwood. If you wanted revenge, just fire me. If you wanted to humiliate me, congratulations. Mission accomplished. But this, keeping me here, watching me struggle, undermining every move I make? What's the point, Gabriel? He closed the laptop slowly, deliberately. You think this is about revenge? What else would it be? I left you at the altar. I said terrible things, and now you're making me pay for it. One degrading project at a time. Something flickered across Gabriel's face. Not anger, but something colder. Disappointment, maybe. He rolled out from behind his desk, stopping a few feet away from her. I didn't buy this company to punish you, Laura. I bought it because you were running it into the ground. The words hit like a slap. Excuse me. You heard me. His voice was calm, clinical. I've been watching Saunders and Associates for 2 years. Your client retention was abysmal. Your risk management was non-existent. You promoted people based on loyalty instead of competence. Marcus's embezzlement didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because you were too busy playing corporate queen to notice the foundation was rotting. That's not... You want to know why I'm making you do client recovery? Gabriel continued, his eyes locked on hers. Because you need to remember what this business actually is. It's not about corner offices and power lunches. It's about relationships, trust, doing the work. Things you forgot the moment you decided being feared was more important than being respected. Laura's hands were shaking. You don't know anything about what I've sacrificed. I know you sacrificed me because you thought I'd slow you down. His voice finally had an edge now, sharp enough to cut. And look where it got you. You became exactly what you thought you wanted, and it almost destroyed everything. The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't come back to break you, Laura, Gabriel said quietly. I came back to save a company that deserved better than what you'd become. He rolled past her toward the door, then paused. The question is, are you going to prove me wrong or prove me right? The crisis came on a Tuesday morning in the form of a phone call that made Richard go pale. Laura was in the conference room when he burst through the doors, his tie askew, sweat beading on his forehead. We have a problem. Hartman Industries is pulling out. All of it. $200 million in managed assets, gone. The room went silent. Hartman was their anchor client, the account that had put Laura on the map 5 years ago. Losing them would be catastrophic, the kind of blow that could undo everything Gabriel had spent 3 months rebuilding. Why? Laura asked, already reaching for her phone. They found out about the SEC investigation. Their board voted this morning. They're moving everything to Blackstone by end of week. Laura's mind raced. She'd call David Hartman directly, leverage their history, offer concessions, restructure the terms. Get Gabriel, she said. Now. He arrived within minutes, rolling into the conference room with the same unshakable calm he always carried. Richard explained the situation in rapid-fire sentences, his panic barely contained. The other executives started talking over each other, proposing solutions that ranged from desperate to delusional. Gabriel listened to all of it without saying a word. Then he picked up the phone and called David Hartman. David, it's Gabriel Brady. I heard about your board's decision. His voice was steady, conversational, like he was discussing lunch plans. I want to be clear. I'm not calling to change your mind. You have every right to protect your assets. But I am calling to offer you something Blackstone can't. Lara watched transfixed, as Gabriel proceeded to dismantle every concern with surgical precision. He didn't beg, didn't offer discounts or make promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he laid out a vision, a restructured portfolio that would not only protect Hartman's assets, but position them for aggressive growth in emerging markets that Blackstone's bureaucracy was too slow to capitalize on. I'll have the full proposal on your desk by tomorrow morning, Gabriel said. If you still want to leave after that, I'll personally oversee the transition to make sure it's seamless. But give me 24 hours to show you why staying is the smarter play. He hung up. The room was silent. He'll stay, Gabriel said simply, already turning his wheelchair toward the door. Lara, I'll need your Hartman files and your team on this. We have 18 hours. She nodded, unable to speak. That night, working alongside Gabriel as they built the proposal, Lara watched him operate with a clarity that took her breath away. He saw patterns she'd missed, anticipated objections before they formed, turned weaknesses into opportunities with a strategic mind that was absolutely ruthless in its brilliance. This was strength, not the ability to stand, but the ability to see 3 moves ahead while everyone else was still panicking about the present. She'd thrown away the strongest man she'd ever known because she'd confused power with posture. And now he was saving her, not because he loved her, but because it was the right thing to do. 6 months after Gabriel Brady walked back into her life, Lara Saunders stood in the same boardroom where her world had collapsed. But this time, the numbers on the screen told a different story. Saunders and Associates was profitable again. Client retention was at 92%. The SEC investigation had been resolved with minimal penalties. 3 major acquisitions had closed in the last quarter alone. The firm that had been circling the drain was now being featured in the Wall Street Journal as a case study in corporate turnaround. Gabriel had saved it, and if Lara was being honest with herself, something she'd learned to do in the last 6 months, she'd helped. The Hartman proposal had been the turning point, not just for the company, but for her. She'd stopped trying to be the Iron Lady and started trying to be good at her job. Stopped worrying about her title and started focusing on the work. It was humbling, exhausting, and somehow the most fulfilling thing she'd done in years. But she knew this moment was coming. Gabriel had called her to his office on a Friday afternoon, and the way he looked at her, professional, distant, but not unkind, told her everything she needed to know. The board met this morning, he said, gesturing for her to sit. She did, her heart hammering in a way that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with the fear of losing something she'd only just learned to value. We've stabilized. We're growing. The crisis is over. Gabriel folded his hands on his desk, which means it's time to formalize the leadership structure going forward. Here it comes, Lara thought. The exit. I'm offering you a choice, Gabriel continued. You can leave. I'll provide a severance package that's more than generous. 2 years' salary, full benefits, and a recommendation that will get you hired anywhere you want to go. No hard feelings. Clean break. Lara's throat tightened. And the other option? You stay, but not as senior partner. You'd be director of client relations, a position you've actually earned over the last 6 months. You'd report to the new COO. You'd have to keep proving yourself every single day. He paused. It's a demotion on paper, but it's real, and it's yours if you want it. She should have felt insulted. A year ago, she would have walked out without a second thought. But that was before she'd remembered what it felt like to build something, instead of just taking credit for it. I want to stay, Lara said quietly. Gabriel nodded, and for the first time in 6 months, something that looked almost like a smile touched his lips. Good. You're good at this, Lara. You always were. You just forgot for a while. She stood to leave, then hesitated at the door. Gabriel. He looked up. Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on you. He held her gaze for a long moment. I didn't do it for you. I did it because everyone deserves a second chance to become who they're supposed to be. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was respect. And somehow that meant more. Gabriel Brady didn't need to walk to stand tall, and Laura Saunders learned that the hardest lesson of all, that strength was never about what you could see, but what you refused to let break you. Sometimes the people we underestimate become the ones who save us. And sometimes, second chances aren't about going back. They're about finally moving forward. What do you think? Did Laura deserve that second chance? Or should Gabriel have let her fall? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about redemption, resilience, and the power of proving people wrong. And here's a question for you. Have you ever underestimated someone and lived to regret it? Or have you been the one people counted out? Share your story below. You never know who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, remember that your worth is never defined by what others think you lack. It's defined by what you refuse to let stop you. See you in the next story.